Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a massive severe weather event that'll begin today and go all the way through Friday. We'll also be discussing a winter storm that'll impact the Midwest through the Northeast over the next few days. I'll give you the latest breakdown on both of these situations and more in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with areas over in the Four Corners states. That is actually where we have a low pressure system centered that is going to bring that severe weather outbreak going into tomorrow and as well as into Friday. This will also bring the winter storm that'll impact the Midwest all the way back through the Northeast, bringing the threat for upwards of a foot of snow Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And in addition to this, there will be a chance for severe weather in the southern plains that has already begun and will continue this evening across areas in Texas and Arkansas and even Louisiana. This is all coming from moisture out of the Pacific Ocean. I'll have more details on this here in just a moment. In terms of watches and warnings across the United States, there is actually winter storm warnings in effect in areas like Minnesota and the Dakotas. Those will be expiring here pretty soon, but that is all due to a low pressure system bringing some snow this afternoon. It is starting to wind down though this evening. Now going into this evening in the overnight hours, we'll be watching for severe weather over areas in the lower Mississippi Valley. We'll also be watching that low pressure system developing over the Four Corners states overnight tonight, and by tomorrow morning this thing will really intensify over the southern plains. This is what's going to bring the severe weather and even the winter storm, and even some snowfall for areas in Oklahoma will be possible. Once we go into Thursday evening and into the overnight hours, severe weather threat will shift into areas like the Mississippi Valley and into the southeast and into the Ohio Valley. This is going to be a pretty large severe weather event that we're watching. Also going into Friday morning, some snow will be possible as far south as areas like Oklahoma, and maybe even if you're in Texas, Wichita Falls may see a little bit of snowfall as well. Going into Friday afternoon and evening, that snow moves into the Midwest and as well as the Northeast, bringing the threat for upwards of a foot of snow. More specific details on that here in just a moment. Now, in terms of the severe weather threat over the next few days, we're going to begin with tonight. There is an enhanced risk of severe weather from Northeast Texas back through western and southwestern Tennessee. Now, the main concerns will be the threat for damaging winds, large hail, but the tornado threat is actually a hatched area today. That is for the threat of maybe an isolated tornado that could be strong in terms of an EF2 plus tornado. So be mindful of that if you're in this area. That tornado threat goes as far east as the Carolinas and as far west as areas in North Texas. And there's also a chance for some significant hail out of a few of these supercells tonight. That is primarily going to be from Northeast Texas back through areas in Arkansas and Northwest Mississippi. The chance for even tennis ball to maybe baseball sized hail is not out of the question tonight. So make sure you bring your cars into your garages tonight. In addition to that, there will be a damaging wind threat primarily in eastern parts of Arkansas back through southwest Tennessee and northwestern Mississippi. Now, in terms of the timing for tonight across Arkansas specifically, there will be some severe storms that have already spawned today. These will continue to rock through areas like Little Rock as well as going through Memphis, Tennessee, right around 8 to 9 o'clock tonight, and these will eventually move out by the overnight hours, but the threat really is this evening and really over the next few hours. Now, in the broad spectrum of things here across the Ohio Valley and as well as into the southeast, storms will fire up this evening, some of these being severe. These ones back up here in the north and east in Ohio, not likely to be severe, maybe some gusty winds at worst case scenario. Back in northwestern Mississippi, there will be a few severe storms as well this evening. Into the overnight hours, showers and storms will continue. Can't rule out an isolated storm still producing some isolated damaging wind gusts, but that threat should remain low for tonight for those in Georgia. Now let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow will definitely be the bigger threat of severe weather. In fact, there is now a moderate threat of severe weather in Northeast Texas through southwestern Arkansas. I mentioned it yesterday in yesterday's forecast. I expected a moderate threat this morning. That in fact did happen, and there's also now an enhanced risk that extends much further back to the west into areas like central Texas near Waco, back through the Metroplex and into western Mississippi. Now, the biggest concern out of this event will be damaging winds. Don't get that too confused with the tornado threat. This is definitely the main threat, will be damaging winds, mainly because the damaging wind threat will be numerous to widespread. That will extend anywhere from, again, North Texas back through western Mississippi. And there's a hatched area. What does that represent? It represents the threat for damaging wind gusts over 75 miles per hour. I would expect wind gusts as high as 100 miles per hour, sort of similar to what we just saw in Oklahoma. The other concern is the tornado threat. There is a 15% area. We did not have this with the Oklahoma event. It is slightly higher than before. That will be for northeast Texas, back through southwest Arkansas and northwestern Louisiana. And by the way, this is the area that will have the strongest low-level jet that will help to rotate these supercells, along with the tornado parameter. It's actually much higher in areas like northeast Texas, back through southwestern Arkansas. Hail threat, that's also a pretty big concern, especially back over from North Texas near the Metroplex, back through southwestern Arkansas. And again, you can notice that hatched area there. That represents a 10% chance within a 25-mile radius of hail over the size of hen eggs. That does mean there's a chance for some tennis ball sized hail, maybe even a little bit of baseball sized hail as well. Now let's talk about the tornado threat. And what we're looking at here is the tornado parameter. This gives us an idea of what the tornado threat will be overall tomorrow. Even though the Storm Prediction Center has a threat outline, this just gives us a little bit better of a representation of when that tornado threat will exist and where we will see it. So beginning with tomorrow afternoon, that is when values start to kick up a little bit between 0 to 1. That's pretty low tornado threat overall. But once we get closer to the afternoon and evening hours, when that line of storms forms over central and north Texas, that is when those tornado parameter values get a little bit higher, upwards of 1 to 2, few areas near 3, and they really peak right around northeast Texas between 2 to 3. Now, in terms of a value between 2 to 3, that's kind of in the medium to medium high sector of a tornado threat with this sort of setup. And even by the overnight hours, closer to around midnight or so, that is when the threat is still existing across southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. The problem will be, though, over in those areas will be the instability, which is a big part of severe weather. The other problem is this will be a linear line of storms, not necessarily discrete supercells out in front of it, which when we have discrete supercells, those can create a much higher tornado threat along with damaging winds and hail. So luckily, there will likely be more of a linear setup once this area of storms enters into Louisiana and Arkansas, which should lower that tornado threat a bit. However, I would not rely on an isolated discrete supercell or two out in front of this line of storms. That is where our greatest tornado threat would be, but the instability becomes very limited past midnight going into really early Friday morning. So there's some good news there, and it really does show on the future radar, which I'll show you in those areas here in just a moment. But let's begin with North Texas for tonight. There actually will be a chance for a couple more storms that could produce some large hail and maybe some downburst winds up to 60 miles per hour. But the bigger concern will be tomorrow. And one thing to note about tomorrow, there will not be much of any cap here across North Texas. That will allow for some shower activity to develop. This could actually help us out a little bit for limiting the discrete supercells out in front of that line of storms that will develop tomorrow evening. But once we get closer to around lunchtime to 2 o'clock, that is when we'll have a couple of storms most likely start to develop. These will be more capable of a hail threat. However, a tornado or two may come out of these as well as we go into the afternoon. Eventually closer to 4 to 5 o'clock, look back out here to the west near Wichita Falls, all the way just east of Abilene. That is when that line of storms will develop. This is going to be very concerning for a damaging wind threat. There may be a couple of embedded tornadoes in this line as early as 4 to 5 o'clock. Once we get closer to 6 to 7, that moves through the Metroplex in North Texas, very populated area. Again, I will be live, by the way, tomorrow. For those in North Texas, I'll definitely be live here on YouTube and as well as on our Facebook page. Make sure that you subscribe down below and as well as click the bell icon so you get notified when I go live. Eventually by 8 to 9 o'clock, that line will move into Paris, Tyler, and as well as into areas closer to East Texas. This will produce more of a damaging wind threat with a few tornadoes embedded in the line being possible, and eventually going closer to the overnight hours. There will actually be a chance, by the way, around the overnight hours for a few snow flurries. Believe it or not, there will actually be a chance for a few snow flurries back up in North Texas right along the Red River, but obviously not really any concern there. The bigger concern will definitely be severe weather. For those in Arkansas, severe storms will fire up potentially during the late afternoon and evening. These ones could be a little bit discreet, so that might increase the tornado threat a little bit. Once we go closer to around 10 to 11 o'clock, that is when that cluster and line of storms moves into Arkansas. These will be capable of primarily damaging winds, with a couple of tornadoes also not out of the question. And by the overnight hours, the line of storms will move into Tennessee as well as into Mississippi. Eventually, there will be a chance for a little bit of snowfall, again, back up in northwest Arkansas. Accumulation not really expected there. Now, for those in Louisiana, there will be a line of storms. I would expect more of a damaging wind threat with this. It will likely be on the weaker end of damaging wind winds between maybe 50 to 70 miles per hour, that range. So really strong to severe storms. For those in Louisiana, primarily closer to midnight tomorrow, and this will move through areas in southern Mississippi by the early morning hours on Friday. And for those back over Mississippi and Alabama, a little bit of a closer look at things. Again, a line of storms will move into the state most likely early Friday morning. This will produce the threat for mainly damaging winds. This will start to ramp back up over in Georgia once we go into Friday. More details on that in our next forecast. Now, there will be a winter storm with this. I mentioned this at the top of the forecast. This will be something to watch out for pretty closely. Now, first beginning with the Ohio Valley, there have been some changes. Obviously, I mentioned this in yesterday's forecast. The snow is much further off to the north and west than previously, so there will be more of a threat for a winter storm from Missouri back into areas like the Midwest. This will primarily take place Friday morning and through the evening hours on Friday. For those in the Midwest, a little bit of a closer look at things. Heavy snow will be possible. This could really accumulate quickly, bringing the threat for upwards of 3 to 6 inches of snow in some areas. Few isolated locations could get upwards of 10 inches as well. And this will continue through the Friday evening hours and maybe even into the overnight for those in Michigan. If you're looking forward to some more snow, here's your snow accumulation for right now from the European model. Just an estimate for what you might see. Most likely 3 to 6 inches from anywhere from northern Missouri back through areas in southeast Wisconsin and northern sections of Illinois. Might even be upwards of a foot of snow back over in Michigan. That is where I would expect the heaviest of the snowfall to be out of this event. Back over in the Northeast, we'll be talking about actually a little winter event. Not really a winter storm, just a little bit of light snow going into tomorrow morning. But really the bigger event will be going into Saturday. That is when some moderate to heavy snow may impact the northern parts of New England, as well as even maybe central New England. This could bring some snowfall accumulation as well. In terms of the snowfall accumulation, we'll be probably talking about in the range of 8 to 12 inches in some areas. I'll have a more refined forecast though as we get closer, as this is just an estimate from the European model. Make sure to subscribe before you leave. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.